There was a church that was noted for its extreme exclusiveness. And one day, a homeless man came into that church to pray during the week. The pastor happened to be around and came up to say hello to the homeless man. And the homeless man said, I'd like to become a member of this church. Well, the pastor said, well, why don't we take a night to pray through that, to pray to God about the most appropriate place for us to attend? And the homeless man said, I can do that. And the pastor thought, well, maybe he'd gotten his point across, and that was that. The next day, the homeless man comes into church again. The pastor sees him and a bit irritated and asks, did you spend the night in prayer as we had talked about? And the homeless man said, oh yeah, I actually had a dream and had a conversation with God about the issue. And the pastor said, really? Tell me about it. He goes, well, I told God I wanted to become a member of his church. He asked me where. I said here. And he said, oh no, you can't get in there. And the homeless man asked, why not? And God said, I've been trying to get into that church for years, and I can't get in. God cannot get into any church where the congregation turns its back upon the least and the last. God has a special place in his heart for the least and the last, the poor, the weak, the hurting, the marginalized, the rejected. Special place in his heart for them. It is communicated abundantly in both testaments of Scripture. Jesus himself, when God was born into our world, he was like a heat-seeking missile. If there was human need, a hurting person, he focused on that one to bring healing and wholeness to God's hurting children, to the least and to the last. And God continues to send his chosen instruments into the world to meet the needs of the least and the last, and we will be judged as his servants on how well we accomplish that task. The opening verse of Psalm 82 sets the stage for the drama that is to follow. God presides in the great assembly. He gives judgment among the gods. We have a scene of a courtroom that is assembled to hear a case with a gallery, with a jury, with a prosecutor, a defender, and God is the presiding judge in this courtroom. He gives judgment among the gods. What gods is being referenced here? Are they the gods of the surrounding nations? Are they false gods? What kind of gods are we talking about? Well, in our text, God, of course, is capital G, and gods is a small g with quotations around it. The word is being used in a figurative sense, and it's being used to refer to people, actually. People who are in authority, who have a power over other people. And these are the ones we're going to find as the text unfolds, that in particular, what are being referenced are the judges, people who have arisen in Israel to be judges of God's people. Now, that word had an expansive meaning in the Old Testament. Originally, a very expansive meaning. A judge was really a ruler of God's people raised up at a moment of crisis to save God's people. In fact, before the kings came, there were judges, and their period in Israelite history is described in the Bible in the book of Judges. Later on, they took more of a classical legal role as we understand the term, when King David and King Solomon, when that period arose. The author of our text, by the way, is a man by the name of Asaph. He was a liturgical leader in Israel at the time. He served during the reigns of King David and King Solomon. And the judges of Israel at that time raised a question in his mind. He asks a rhetorical question in our text. How long will you defend the unjust and show partiality to the wicked? Now, why would someone who has been elevated to a position to maintain justice, why would that person defend the cause of the unjust and the wicked? You don't suppose there was something in it for the judge, do you? Well, maybe someone who has benefited by unjust gain is taking a little sliver of that and lining the pocket of the judge to get a favorable ruling. Well, let's not be naive. It happens occasionally under the best of circumstances. Sometimes, though, it becomes normative in a culture. And it had by Asaph's day, and a culture that was going awry. But no matter what the public is doing, what society is doing, God never goes along with that program. Asaph speaks again for God with a capital G, to the gods with a little g, who serve as judges in Israel. Defend the cause of the weak and fatherless. Maintain the rights of the poor and oppressed. Rescue the weak and needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked. As was said, God has a special place in his heart for the least and the last. Anyone who doesn't get that point from both testaments of Scripture and the example of Jesus, they don't get anything. They don't know anything. And apparently the justices in Israel at that time were ignorant of this partiality on the part of God. They know nothing, Asaph writes. They understand nothing. They walk about in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are shaken. Once I was purchasing a bottle of wine from a gift store inside of a restaurant called The Wine Cellar that was within walking distance of the house I married into. And I was over to get a bottle of wine for dinner, and while I'm there, the cashier is kind of making change for me, and all of a sudden, the wine glasses on the shelves around start dancing across the shelves, and the wine bottles are jiggling, and the ground is shaking. And I look into the eyes of that cashier who's looking right at me, and he perfectly reflects the panic that I am feeling at that moment. And then from behind a partition comes a 12-foot copper wine vat that's on a dolly with steel wheels being rolled against a wood plank floor. And what we thought for sure was an earthquake was that big vat being taken across the floor. And the cashier, when we both see that, we both look back at each other, and he gives me my change. He doesn't say anything. I don't say anything. I just walk out the door, but I guarantee you we had a moment there. We depend upon the foundations of this building to be solid, not to shake, not to have these chandeliers shaking during our worship service. We expect the ground upon which we walk to be solid, and when it shakes, it is a dreadful experience. It's viscerally a panicked moment. And it's the same way when the foundations of the earth are shaken, when the foundations of society become shaken. The election cycle we are in right now is weird, and it's getting weirder all the time, and I wouldn't be surprised if it got weirder still before it was all over. We expect a certain measure of stability in our leaders, and when that is not there, the foundations are shaken, and it makes us nervous. I remember the recent convention in town. There was a T-shirt that was printed for that. Welcome to Cleveland. It's gonna be a riot. Well, there was no riot any more than there was an earthquake at the wine cellar that day. But when things are shaken, we get feelings of dread, feelings of panic. Israel was experiencing this when they depended upon judges to render justice. fairly and impartially. But the norms at the time, it became normative for that not to happen. That shakes the foundations of the earth. And it becomes a very unstable situation and filled with dread and panic. And it ought to cause dread, because when the foundations are shaken enough, only to a certain point, everything falls apart. And when everything falls apart, it's in nobody's best interest. When the exile came, even the judges were carried off as part of a slave race. It's in nobody's best interest when that happens. Asaph draws his own conclusion. I said, you are all gods, you are all sons of the Most High, but you will die like mere men. You will fall like every other ruler. Rise up, O God, judge the earth, for all the nations are your inheritance. God will judge the judges. God will judge everyone in a position of authority who misuses, abuses their authority for self-serving purposes, and it's always at the expense of the most vulnerable in our world. We're all, even pastors, we're all going to die and stand before the judge at the last hour to give an account for whether or not we've been faithful to our charge. Thank goodness we're not judges. I think we can say that. But there are other ways that we are in authority over others. Educators, teachers are in authority over students, right? You have to go to school. It's compulsory education. They tell you how to think. They give you assignments you have to complete, and they judge you with a grade on how well you are doing. No wonder James writes in his New Testament book, not many of you should presume to be teachers, my brothers and sisters, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly. And now that I think about it, we pastors, a little bit of judgment going on there. I don't know if it was me or I perceived it, but we will be judged. We must give an account. Hence it is written to those regarding their religious leaders, obey your leaders and submit to their authority. They keep watch over you as men who must give an account. Did we fleece the flock entrusted to our care, or did we feed the flock? Do we betray the trust placed in us, or do we prove faithful to that trust? Now, if you are not a pastor or a teacher or a judge, maybe you are a parent and you have been given authority over God's children that He has entrusted to your special care. You're going to have to, tell them how to behave and what to do and what not to do. You will have authority over them. And you will judge them in their behavior from time to time. But you are charged with their safekeeping. You know that they require a safe, secure, stable family environment in which to prosper and grow healthy and whole. Otherwise, they're hamstrung. Otherwise, they have to accommodate. You know that's what they need. Will you deprive what they need for a moment's pleasure when you have an opportunity to compromise your faithfulness to your spouse? When you're found out and a divorce ensues and you deprive your children selfishly of what they require, the ones you are to love the most? We are, all of us, in roles of authority from one time or another. There will always be people who look to us as mentors, as teachers, as guides, as friends, as angels of mercy in their hours of need. And God will place those needs within the sphere of our influence along our path. Will we turn our heads and walk the other way? Or will we reach out and help the least and the last as God gives us every opportunity? Be prepared to be a little God with a little g, who represents God with a big G to His children. Gaze upon them with his eyes. See them as he sees them, as children of God, loved with a perfect love. Embrace them with your arms for him. Speak his words of love and tenderness and encouragement and hope. Let his words be spoken through your lips. Give your time, your talents, your resources as he gives you opportunity to help those in need. We are all of us, pastors, teachers, judges, parents alike. We are all mere mortals, and in the end we will die and stand before the judge at the last hour to give an account for those times when he called us to represent him. I suppose the good news in all of this is that even though we are mortal gods, we will have a chance at immortality if we prove faithful to our high calling. Please rise.